Hello, BookTube. Friday reads. Weekend that I'm not working coming up. Glass of wine. Piles of books. And vacation coming up. And the kids going back to school. So it's that time of year. Hard to believe. As you can tell from the reading table, I have lots of plans. We'll see how they go. Maybe even get out this coming week to a used bookstore I know about over in Henniker, New Hampshire. I'm hoping I can. So this will be the Friday, the week's wrap up. And it'll be the Shakespeare Tube. Yeah, that's what it's called. The first play was Taming and the Shrew, which I enjoyed. So we'll get to that here in a minute. The book I read this week was one sent to me by Steve Donoghue that I really enjoyed. It's an American history by Robert P. Watson. It's The Ghost Ship of Brooklyn. And it is, let's see here, Da Capo Press, 2017. And it's about, has some images. It's a history. It has extensive notes by chapter and also has a pretty good bibliography and an index, all three of which are necessary with nonfiction, especially history. You want to know where the historian got their information. Fast-paced read. Learned a few things. Starts out with the ship that it becomes the prison ship in New York during the American Revolution, the notorious ship. About twice as many men and boys were killed on that ship. Died from disease, torture, all sorts of brutal things. Starvation. About twice as many men and boys, 11,500, died on that prison ship that died in combat during the entire war. And it was a long war. So I knew about prison ships because the woman who donated the land my library is built on over a century ago, her grandfather was on board one of these ships. I don't know if it was this one, and I will look into it. I have to dig into the archives to find out. So when I mentioned that, Steve Donoghue sent the book along, and really learned a lot. It's a very interesting story, fast-paced. We start off with an invasion by the British into Cartagena and into Latin America, and it's just a disaster. And this ship, the HMS Jersey, was along for the ride. She was a new and pretty powerful warship at the time, but she sometimes happens with ships. She was a hard luck case, and she ended up a hulk in the Revolution and moored in one spot, a place called Wallabout Bay off the East River, and that's where the prisoners were kept, just a little offshore, so the diseases wouldn't spread into the population of the city, but close enough so they could be seen. And it's almost like a terror thing. You knew if you ended up there, it was pretty bad for you. And most of the people, the men and boys, and they were boys, 12-year-olds, most of them who ended up on this ship came from privateers. Privateers are ships given a letter by the Continental Congress, in this case, to raid British shipping. So the British looked on them as pirates, and although the British used privateers themselves in many wars. So there was one little catch with it, a factual problem I found on one point, where General Knox is given credit for taking out Ticonderoga and getting the cannons back that saved Boston, drove General Gage out of Boston. And it is true that Knox did bring the cannons from Ticonderoga to Boston. They were set up on the heights, and the British left. But what two other things weren't true. He wasn't a general. He was a colonel when he did it. And Benedict Arnold and Ethan Allen are the ones who took that fort and took those guns. As a Vermonter, I say it was Ethan Allen, but anybody who studied the military life of Benedict Arnold knows he was no slouch. He was a great combat general. So anyway, but the author corrects it later in the book, so it must be a slip of some sort or a slip of wording or something, because he's apparently well aware that Ethan Allen, because he talks about Ethan Allen as a prisoner, so he's well aware that Ethan Allen had taken, and he states as much as taken Ticonderoga, so that may just be a matter of wording and a matter of understanding. So that was the Ghost Ships of Brooklyn. Then to get into the stack here a little bit, let me see where we have it. Right here. This is something to deal with. For Shakespeare, Marjorie Garber's Shakespeare After All is the volume I'm using as a guide. So The Taming of the Shrew is her piece on it there. Steve Donoghue pointed out to me that it would have been a good idea to have an author photo. I think he likes the author's two companions, and they are beautiful, aren't they? And so if anybody's going to have a discussion about author photos, I guess you'd have to say, what does it mean when the author loves her pets so much she includes them? So this was handy background. The discussion of the play within the play was really well done. You have the character Sly, who's a drunk. Some lord finds him. As a practical joke, they put him in a lord's bed and act like he's a lord who's been asleep for, I think, 15 years. And then The Taming of the Shrew, it's a play that's actually shown to this character. So it's the play within the play. And it's very funny, a lot of double entendres of many types. And it's just fun. It's a comedy, obviously. And I enjoyed it very much. It's one I had not read entirely. I did a scene from it this summer at an event. So I already knew about Petruchio and Kate. Kate is the shrew. So that was fun seeing that section. It's the section right before Petruchio leaves and says, "I'll be back in a week for the wedding." So a wonderful play. I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to the next one. But the rest of another thing I thought I'd bring up, because there's going to be a lot of people talking about the play. Two books that I read last year about Shakespeare's First Folio, and I thought this is a perfect opportunity to bring them up. And so I grabbed them from the library just so I could show them. The first one, they're both by Emma Smith. And let's see if they have a little. She's a professor of Shakespeare studies at Hertford College in Oxford. So this is the first. Well, I don't know what order they came in, but this is the order I'm doing them here. This is the making of Shakespeare's First Folio. It is Bodleian Library, University of Oxford. And this one is 2015. So this tells how the folio was made. The story about how it was made. And it's broke up in these parts. Plays and their presentation, Shakespeare's reputation, Team Shakespeare, the backers, printing and publishing, and early readers. And I'll give you an idea of some of the images. So this is how the folio came to be, the famous First Folio, which a few years ago made a trip down to the rare book room at Boston Public Library, which is a stunning library, and they allowed me to take photographs of the First Folio, and it was a big deal for me. There was a few other books there too. So this is the making of Shakespeare's First Folio, Emma Smith. Now it's easy to confuse with the second book, also by her. So if anybody was into ordering it to get an idea how the folio came to be, this would be the one you would get. This next one is Emma Smith, Shakespeare's First Folio, 4 Centuries of an Iconic Book. So it is the story of the book once made, how it comes down to us. And this, Oxford University Press, and this one is 2016, so they are in order. Here's the author. And it's a very detailed and really thorough history of how this has been, how this book, this very famous book, how it's fared through the centuries, and with a lot of characters involved in its story, and I enjoyed them both. Both they're scholarly works, but for those of you that don't mind that, I think they're well worth reading. So I wanted to bring those up, and my plans for the for next week. I'm hoping there's a short story I started in this Louis L'Amour's Lost Treasure. I'm partway through. It's called Jeremy Lockhart. It's so far so good. So I'm reading that. I pulled out Boccaccio's The Decameron because in September we're going to be starting to read that. So I just want to look at it, make sure I had a copy. This is from 1930. It's Garden City Publishing, translated by Richard Aldington. Quite a beautiful thing. So I was looking through that a little bit. I'll do the ShakeTube. And moving right along here. Actually, it won't be in this volume. It'll be in one of the companion volumes. I think this week's coming up Richard III. I may be wrong on that. I'll double check. And I've started on Leonard, by Leonard Nimoy, by William Shatner and David Fisher, that I had on my plan for this month to get read, and I just dipped into that a little bit. And just because it never fails, I keep trucking away with Jacques Brezun's Burley Oats, and at this rate, I don't know if I'll finish it by the end of the year. And then try to fit in this, The Massacre of Mankind, Stephen Baxter. It's a sequel to War of the Worlds. Thank you to Steve Donoghue for this. I'm actually really looking forward to this. I'd like to do, if it lives up to the billing, I'd like to do a book chat about it. So we'll see how that goes. But a bit to do. But like I say, I've got a bit of a vacation coming up here, and the only thing I'm really planning on doing is maybe sometime during the week going over to this bookstore, used bookstore. Maybe they'll let me take some video, and if they do, I'll put it on the channel. So that was a Friday Reads wrap up, and ShakeTube. I just sort of compressing everything into one quick video. Not so quick, 14 minutes, but thank you, BookTube.